In this episode of The Heart of Teaching Music, we have Assistant Director of Bands at James Madison University, Chris DeVona. Chris, let's play a game. What instrument do Julia and I play?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, all right. Here we go. Julia, you are a clarinetist.
Oh, my gosh.
No?
I introduced myself as a recovering clarinetist.
Wait, are you actually a clarinetist?
I'm actually a clarinetist.
Oh, nailed it. Look at that.
You're a magician. How about Scott?
This is a tough one.
Hi, I'm Julia Baumanis.
And I'm Scott Edgar. Welcome to The Heart of Teaching Music.
Because without people, there is no music. This space is dedicated to the stories behind the sound.
Stories of identity, belonging, and the courage to make a difference through music.
Join us as we welcome leaders in music and music education who share their journeys, their challenges,
and what it truly means to teach, connect, and lead in our profession. Together, we'll explore why music matters and discover the true power of music for all.
Hi, Chris. Welcome to the Heart of Teaching Music. Just so our audience kind of knows a little bit about you, like Scott said, Assistant Director of Bands at James Madison University. You do a lot of stuff. Symphonic band, pep band, the Marching Royal Dukes. That's pretty cool. And we're really excited to also talk to you about your books that you have out there. You have both Expanding the Canon, which is a conductor excerpt book that truly does expand the canon beyond, the classical Western excerpts, which I've used with my students, and I love it. It's amazing. I'd like to pick your brain about it a little bit more. And then also your GIA published book, Small Band, Big Sound, a resource guide for smaller programs, smaller in numbers, right? But smaller doesn't necessarily mean lesser than. I think that's something you tackle beautifully within your book. So we'd like to thank GIA Publications as our episode sponsor, making wonderful conversations like this possible. I'm excited to have you here. I'm excited to have our guests talk to you, and welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm glad to be here. This should be a lot of fun.
Yeah. Scott and I always dig in with our guests. It's sort of the framing question around our podcast, which is, what is the heart of teaching music to you?
Oh, okay. That's a broad question. I love it. Well, I think I got to go back to when I was teaching high school and middle school band up in Connecticut. Right out of undergrad, I got a position at a small school up in New Haven, Connecticut. And I think over the few years that I was there, I sort of settled on one large-scale philosophy for my students as an outcome. And that was that by the time they graduated, I wanted my students to both have a desire to keep playing music and making music in their life somehow, whether it was being a music major or more often just finding a way to play if they're going to play in a college band or go play in a community band or play somewhere, but to keep making music. And then the flip side of that, I wanted them to have the skills to actually make that happen. Now, so we would talk often about, the difference between a high school band and a community band or a college band where, in a high school, you're going through a little bit more of the mechanics, like how do I learn this music? What do I do? How do I make it happen? Versus, in a community ensemble, it's less about the learning and more about the doing. They show up to play music for fulfillment and enjoyment, and they have fun with it. But it's not really a situation where someone's going to show you, like, this is how you need to do this the way you would in a classroom. So I always pose to my students, if I have any two things at the end of 4 years, it's that you want to keep playing music and that you're able to do that after graduating.
That's amazing.
Chris, such a great philosophy. I'm curious how that impacts, now that you're at James Madison, how does that impact how you interact with your college students and maybe envision, hey, no student who played in high school doesn't have a place here at JMU?
Yeah, we try to keep as much of an open door policy with our ensembles as possible. Pretty much every version of ensemble music at JMU has a place for the non-auditioned, not music. I don't like using the word non-music majors. It seems a little exclusive, but, folks who are majoring in something that's not music, for the engineering majors and the English majors and whatever they're doing, but whoever wants to play or sing can do it at JMU. We have a group that's available to them for whatever skill level they come in at, and we work with them to place them in an appropriate ensemble there. We have our audition groups that have a little bit, a different protocol, different process for entry, but then we always have an open door group where everyone can come play music in. And it's a great perspective, having worked at the high school level, to see what kinds of students are coming out of a high school music program into the university with different attitudes and different perspectives on that. What do they want to get out of their music making experience in college? Is it a music degree? Is it a music major? Do they want to go be a music teacher? Or do they just like the fulfillment and the social aspect, and they just like music and they want to keep playing or singing, whatever they do?
Yeah, I think that's wonderful because I was told growing up that if you wanted to do something as a trade, if you wanted to become that quote unquote when you grew up, that was the reason for you to go and participate in bands in college. And if that wasn't part of what you wanted to do when you grew up, then you needed to go do things that were going to be associated with your profession, your future profession. But I love that it doesn't have to be that. It could be yes and. You have a space for everybody. That's something that we talk about on this podcast is truly music for all. And maybe that's a good segue to both of your publications. I think understanding that, conducting excerpts, and this is me talking about your Expanding the Canon publication that you put together with a team of people. The excerpts that we use don't have to be one thing. It could be yes and. It could be expanded. Let's talk about what Expanding the Canon is about.
Oh, sure.
What it's used for, kind of what was its genesis. Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so that book really started as I was in a conducting pedagogy course at Westchester University with Andy Yozgiak and Adam Gumbel.
Mm-hmm.
And we were sort of looking at the difference between our concert programming in the band field and how we're sort of shifting our attention and trying to make sure that we're a little bit more careful about programming, but how that same effort isn't always mirrored in the conducting class, where, obviously on a concert program, your programs are very publicly visible. You post them places wherever, and it's a very visible thing. And it seemed a little bit of a shame that sometimes conducting classes didn't get that same attention to making sure we were getting a bit more representation in our curriculum and in the conducting excerpts we were doing. So the origin of that project was really trying to create a supplement to give teachers a resource to help do that. As a teacher, we're always sort of, there's never enough time in the day to plan exactly what we want to do and all the things we'd love to do. But sometimes just having a resource available opens up a lot of options there. So that was the goal. There was just to make a resource that we could give to people and that we could actually, help them, do something with it.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know the book, it has just excerpts that are really valuable to developing conductors who are advancing through their conducting curriculum. That's written by composers of all identities, all musical styles. I particularly appreciate that there are some exercises in there that kind of highlight like rhythmic stuff that conductors really need to work on. But there's not a lot of examples of that in some like orchestral repertoire. There's a lot more rhythmic stuff in some of the modern wind band stuff that we have to develop as conductors. And I have found that resource is a really good one. So I just wanted to shine a light on that because I think it's excellent. Let's maybe shift gears to your small band, big sound resource published by GIA. Could you tell our audience a little bit about what this book is about, what your goals with the book are, and how it sort of manifested from there?
Yeah, sure. As I mentioned before, when I was teaching up in Connecticut, I started at a pretty small high school.
Mm-hmm.
I came in after having attended myself like a large suburban high school. We had a fairly, extensive band program, went through a college program where there were, these fully staffed ensembles all the time. And I showed up at my first teaching job, and I think the concert band was 15 students.
Mm.
And it was a whole different world that I wasn't really prepared for.
Yeah.
And I found that there weren't quite as many resources as I would have liked at that time. I think nowadays there's a bit more out there in terms of published repertoire, but still not a lot of conversation about how to teach those groups, how to plan those groups, how to use that repertoire. And, as I kept working with my own ensembles and just trial and erroring everything that I could with them, I sort of gained some traction with local programs, other small schools in the area. And when I left Connecticut, I found that there were schools in other states that I visited who were kind of in similar situations,
Yep.
over in Pennsylvania when I was at Westchester and now in Virginia down at JMU. I found that a lot of the same ideas I had worked on and developed in Connecticut were still applicable everywhere. And at some point, I can't even remember who, someone said, well, why don't you just write this stuff down? You keep helping band directors with the same thing over and over. And I always keep in the back of my mind, like there's a rule of thumb. If you keep saying something over and over, just write it down.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody else wants to read it. Somebody else could find use in this. This info could help somebody else. And that's what I did. I contacted Garwood Whaley over at Meredith Music, part of GIA, and just said, I got this idea for a book. What do we think? And they really worked with me to help develop a structure for it and really get the ideas that we thought would be most helpful and most concise for either a new director who's in, a program that just arrived in and they're trying to figure out how to do what they do, or even an experienced director who's, maybe looking for new ideas and just trying to sort of codify all the small tips and tricks that they've figured out over the course of a career and try to write those things down into a more, transferable medium.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, so I think we were cut from similar cloths. I taught at a high school where we had a very small band, and now I teach at a college that is half the size of most of the high schools in the direct area. And that puts such an onus of recruiting, puts such an onus on me and the community that we've developed to help really build. So I found that, yes, musically, and all the wonderful things you address in your book is so important. How do we make high quality music with a small group? But I find almost equally as important, how do we build that sense of belonging when there's not a group of 60 or multiple bands? So any thoughts over your career, how you've really focused in a smaller program, building that sense of community, that sense of belonging for your students?
I think I approach a sense of belonging in a small band the same way we do in smaller groups within a larger band. I look at the band at James Madison University, and there's such a great culture within pockets of the band. You see, the saxophones who have this like great social group together. You have, the percussionists, you have the trumpets, and you find these sort of groups that form anyway. And in a small band, it's trying to create that same sense of belonging, that same sense of community and friendship and social engagement that you find even in a large band, but just trying to replicate that in a small band in a way where you have to get the whole band involved somehow. In a large group, it's a little bit easier because your role within the ensemble starts to, you have that shared experience with somebody. If you're working, in a trumpet section together with someone, you have some shared experience there. You're looking at the same music, and it provides that beginning kernel of conversation that develops into a friendship. It's always wonderful the way that those small interactions grow so quickly, but you need something to start with there.
Mm-hmm.
And, trying to replicate that in a small band, it's just a little bit different to try to get everyone on the same page to the point where they can find that commonality to grow from, if that makes any sense.
Perfect.
Yeah, it does. I am the opposite. I was teaching in big bands for most of my career. And then my first college teaching position was at a smaller D2 university, where a lot of my students were students who were from the rural area. They lived on farms, they grew up, their family owns a lot of land and were in agriculture. And I just found that because there wasn't a lot of people on campus, their smaller groups of teams, whether that be a band team or an athletic team or, an engineering after school group or whatever, they seem to, have like a more tight bind to each other. So, and then I moved to Rutgers, and Rutgers is a very large university, but I find that a lot of bands in New Jersey are smaller. You could throw a rock in at a high school, and that's because there's a bazillion high schools and small programs, not a ton of large numbers. And I find that my students who come to Rutgers, who are part of a big school of music program, have sometimes difficulty imagining themselves taking on a position in a smaller program with quote unquote smaller numbers. Do you have any advice for the music education student who might be afraid of that experience? Any guidance, any word of wisdom, anything to get them motivated to go for that job and say, yeah, that's an excellent job, as well as the giant, director number 3 position at a band with a bazillion, people in it, that the smaller programs are really good jobs as well. And don't be afraid of it.
Yeah, the sense of community within the small groups, I think you said it very well. The sense of community is just unmatched in those small programs where, I found that as a teacher, when I was working with a very limited number of students, the amount that I could cater the learning to those individual students was off the charts. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, you could really get every student exactly what they needed, especially when you're sort of managing the repertoire so carefully. In a large program, it's rather difficult actually to find, repertoire that suits everyone in the ensemble just right, because you're always sort of bound by what's written there. It's hard to find music that challenges, these students, but not those students, too much, and to find everyone in their exact learning spot to meet them where they're at. But in a small program, when you're sort of managing the repertoire so much more carefully, you have so much more of a toolbox there to do that with your students. So you can adapt the repertoire in a way that really meets every student right where they're at. And that's a gift as a teacher. That's an opportunity that you can't find in a large program. It's a unique thing.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because I think that's one of the holdbacks of my students is that they're afraid they're not going to have the instrumentation. And what that means to me is that maybe they don't have the skills to adapt the music appropriately. So what are some, words of advice, or is there some steps they can take to get more comfortable with that? We're talking about arranging, perhaps.
Yeah.
But how did maybe you get started in that kind of stuff?
I think you brought up a good point with arranging. And I admit my introduction to teaching, when I graduated high school, being a band director was not on the to-do list. It wasn't really where I wanted to go. I wanted to be a composer. I wanted to write music.
Oh, cool.
I discovered, as we all do when we get to college, you're like, okay, maybe this isn't quite what I want to do. But arranging was always like a very persistent thing in my work. And I kept arranging and arranging more music. And eventually some of the directors I was arranging for said, Chris, like you seem to know this music well. Why don't you get up and teach it? Why don't you go conduct it? And that was sort of my gateway to teaching and band directing and conducting in general. And that definitely was the backbone of my teaching with the small group, was that I always seemed to arrange the music I wanted. And a lot of the stuff like in the small band book, what I go, talk about at conferences when I go work with programs is trying to share some of the very accessible levels of that. As a band director, I think some students, as you're saying, they're a little bit afraid to take that leap with a small group and start arranging or adapting music because it seems like such a scary thing. All of our lives, we give our students, the best music we can find. And sometimes that actually creates a little bit of a gap because our students see like, okay, this is like crazy good, really complicated music. I could never do something like that. But in reality, like an okay arrangement can still make a really good lesson and can still make some really great music out of it. I mean, that's my advice for teachers is just go for it. Try, arrange a duet for your band. Whatever music your source music it is, make a duet, make a trio, and just get 2 parts going in the room, get 3 parts going in the room, and grow it from there until your arranging skill gets a little more confident. But little, like small steps, one thing at a time. It really is, it's an accessible thing that I think most music programs do prepare their students for, whether or not we're practicing that exact skill. The stuff that we're learning in a music education program is always related. Everything from like the voice leading exercises and theory courses to, model composition somewhere.
Yeah.
Those are all like incredibly useful skills that transfer easily when you're willing to just go for it. Like, don't be afraid to fail. Worst case scenario, the music doesn't work and you have a moment of honesty with your students and say, yep, that wasn't it. We're going to try again next week.
I think that's so powerful. It's showing your students that it's okay to make mistakes. Vulnerability is good. It's how we learn. So I think that's powerful.
Chris, I love the vulnerability. Echo what Julia just said. We had Paula Kreider on our show just a couple of weeks ago, and PC and I share a heart that music doesn't have to be difficult to be good. And I think that is exactly what you were just hitting at. But I think sometimes that's a hard sell, especially in smaller programs. You see the flashy, you see the big bands, you see what's up on, websites and YouTube, and you're like, it's almost inferiority. It's like, oh, I'm never going to be that. How do we break that down so that our students can say, hey, this is just really great music, and difficulty is not the only litmus test that we need to put against it?
It's such a magical moment when you play something that's definitely sight readable with your students and they start to figure out the difference between what's a good performance and a great performance. And sometimes it just comes down to that, is playing something enough times over and over where they start to feel the difference between done correctly and done exceptionally well. And that's always a magical moment. Random story. I can't remember why this comes to mind, but I remember being in high school. We had tenor saxophone sectionals and we rehearsed in like the uniform closet, I think, because every section needed a space. And I remember every now and then, our section leader, who was a senior at the time, he'd say, okay, like memorization test. And he would turn off the lights and it was a closet. So it would go pitch black. In hindsight, I'm like, maybe that wasn't the best idea. But in the moment, looking back to it, it's like, I think that's the first time I ever remembered to play music and just close my eyes and listen to the people around me and play as a group. And it really is something different when your students start to realize, when they're beyond the point of notes and rhythms, when they're beyond memorizing the music, when they know the music so well, but you start to feel that difference. Like, what did it feel like when we performed something exceptionally well, whatever that means and whatever your scope of ability and achievement is? It really is cool. That's one of the things that I love the most about the marching band world, actually, is that unlike concert band world, we tend to have, a dozen performances of the same music over and over and over again. And you can have that conversation, Monday morning after the show is over, you come back and you say, hey, how did the show go? And your students say, like, they start to realize the difference. Like, this was a very clean show. Everything was technically correct. Everything was in the right place. Like, I did the job correctly, but it didn't feel great. And you'll come back the next week and they'll say, that show was a mess. I played so many wrong notes. We didn't hit this thing. The tempo was all over the place. But man, that show felt awesome. It was just an extraordinary show. And trying to find that marriage between the two, that's the constant battle. And I find, as I work with concert ensembles more and more, there's that same idea. The students can start to recognize the difference between a clean performance and a great one. I don't say great one, an emotionally rewarding performance. I'll say that, and to try to find that sweet spot between the two.
Yeah. I think that there's magic in what we do. Like, there's no other way to explain it. Like, we have the opportunity to make art, which you can't see, Yes, you can hear it. Yeah, I guess you could see if there's, the marching arts, the visual aspect of it, right? But what we're doing is truly nonverbal, but you feel it when it's done right in a way that we truly to this day cannot explain. And we do it with others. There's nothing like it in the world. And I just feel like the more moments that we could have for our students, whether it be, a tenor sax sectional in a dark closet or, taking the grand stage for nationals, I think those are the formative, beautiful moments that a student, regardless of whether or not they're going to go on and be a professional musician for the rest of their life, those are going to be formative memories for that person. And I think it's magic. I truly do.
Let's take a quick break.
This episode is sponsored by GIA Publications. GIA is a leading publisher of music education resources. From music play for infants to beginning band and strings methods, college-level texts to music aptitude tests, books from leading voices in music education to top-notch recordings, GIA has something for you. Visit giamusic.com to learn more. giamusic.com.
HOTM friends, we want to hear your voice. Do you have a comment, a general question, or even a question for a specific future guest? Great, because you can be a part of a future episode. Visit musicforall.org/podcasts for a list of future guests. And then all you have to do is click the Ask a Question button. We may include your voice in a future episode. Again, to record your question, just go to musicforall.org/podcasts. Let's rejoin our conversation.
We do get people to send in questions for our guests, and we have one teed up for you.
This is Tyler Swick in Las Vegas, Nevada. And my question is, if you could recreate music education for public schools, what would you include that is currently not included?
Whoa.
Big question.
It's a big question. I mean, it's so difficult to say because, every program out there, and every time you think, hey, I've got this fantastic idea, you start searching around the internet and someone's already done it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if I have an answer to what I would include that no one has ever done before, because I think that's one of the beautiful things about music education is that we're all just trying new things all the time, and that helps the field develop so much and to stay engaged with the modern world in a way that I think other subjects don't always do. I think music has such a vehicle for staying up with the times. And so I guess if I had to add anything to it, it's somewhere where we can collect all of our thoughts even better. It's somewhere where we can share those ideas in a space that's not judgmental. We have conferences and, that's a great place to share ideas and things, but somewhere that's even a little bit more accessible than that. The communities you see like on social media groups that pop up sometimes, it's about just sharing ideas. But somehow, if you could create this magical system that just shares all of our ideas in a great way where we could see each other's lessons and see each other's performances and just learn from each other in that way, I would love that so much. I spend so much time trying to go visit concerts. Sometimes I turn on YouTube and just search like live band concert in the evening. If I have, 15 minutes as I'm sitting there, getting some work done, and I'll just watch 10 minutes of a high school band's concert online if they put it live somewhere, and just to watch what they're doing and see where they're at. I'll find a band from Nevada or from, wherever. And I think that's a great tool. But even then, just to keep building those resources so we can learn from each other more and more.
Yeah, almost like a knowledge Rolodex, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Because like you said, I think there's a bazillion organizations that are doing the amazing work of resources and building and making things open for others to join. But there are some things I still think there's some barriers in our field. You mentioned going to conferences. It's very expensive, even if it's just down the road. And it's a financial expense, but it's also like a time expense too. If you have a family, if you're a caretaker for somebody, if you are also just maybe the only person at your job and it's just like very overwhelming because maybe you're the only general music teacher in your district and you're going to 17 schools, there's a time equity and there's also a resource equity that I wish that we could eliminate if we were all had the magic wand, eliminate all of that. And maybe that's a good segue to a question that we ask our guests, which is, in your opinion, what does music for all mean to you?
There's a space for everyone to make music somewhere. And I know that's probably sort of what the name came from, I assume. But I really just mean, like wherever you're coming from, every school, every program has their own resources. They have their own community engagement. They have their skill sets. They have whatever they have to work with. And they have the number of students that they have. Wherever they're coming from, it's to make an opportunity for everyone to participate in the same kind of way, without having these barriers to certain types of music making, things, whether they be financial or just, size of roster or location or something like that, but to try to bring these experiences to everyone and make them accessible for everyone, so that, wherever they're starting from, they have the chance to learn the same things musically, to participate in the same kinds of experiences at whatever engagement level they're there for.
Yeah.
Chris, I've loved your heart throughout the entire conversation we've had so far. And that has to come from some experience that you've had in your life as a music student. So where'd that come from? Did it come from, are your parents musicians? Did you have just an absolutely amazing music educator in your life? What inspired the person that we're talking to today?
I grew up in a musical family. I mean, none of my older relatives were like music majors. We just live in a very musical house. We would sing and dance all the time. And I really, the music teachers I had growing up in the town I did were outstanding. I still visit the town very frequently. I'm still very close friends with all of them. And I really can't thank them enough for how much opportunity they gave me just in what music we could make and how much they showed me, what music can do. I remember sitting in a band room one day having a rehearsal, and it was just a regular run through of a piece of music. But I remember some students came into the room to, deliver something to the teacher or whatever. And I remember they were kind of standing there in the front of the room, in the band room, as we were playing through our music. And for us, it was like a regular Tuesday, like we're going to run through the marching band show. But I remember watching them just stand absolutely in awe. And I remember thinking like, oh yeah, we do this every day. And a lot of people don't get to experience this ever. Like it's such a gift. It's such a privilege that we have to just go play music wherever we are, that some people, they never quite had that chance to do it, or they never wanted to do it. Maybe it's really remarkable that we get to do that so much, in a way that a lot of folks, it totally bewilders them how we make such incredible, beautiful stuff out of dots and lines on a page.
Yeah. I love that you said we get to do this. Teaching's hard. Being a musician, which isn't, the most financially rewarding career out there most of the times, it's difficult. But every person that I've met that is sort of in the energy that you are has mentioned something about we get to do this. This is a privilege. This is a calling. We've talked a lot to our guests about the calling. So you mentioned that you grew up in a musical family, perhaps not professional musicians, but at what point did you realize you wanted to do this for a living?
It was definitely sometime around middle school. I think seeing the transition from my elementary school band to the middle school band, and they were our idols. I mean, I remember being a fifth grader, and there was nothing I was looking forward to more than going to join the middle school band because they were unbelievable. Like they were superheroes to me. And I remember sitting in eighth grade thinking the same thing about the high school band. We saw them, down the street at like the local Memorial Day parade, like standing in their fancy uniforms. Meanwhile, we had like t-shirts and khaki shorts on and they had uniforms, and we were just blown away. Like we couldn't believe that those were humans, that those were people who had been where we were, only a year or two ago. And I think every time, like that feeling still hasn't gone away. Every time I go visit another ensemble, even if it's an ensemble that, they're, not that we can put a metric on it, but an ensemble that I've been around, some sort of equivalent music making for a long time. When I see a new group of people who are strangers, like it's still absolutely mind boggling to watch them make music. And you think like they couldn't possibly be human. Like I don't understand how they do this. But then you get to know them, and it's incredible every time that you get to meet them and realize they're just like us. They're people. They were band kids at some point. They had to learn how to play their instrument from scratch. And they're the same dorky band kids we all are.
The accessibility in our profession is kind of unreal. It's like, okay, so you have a question for a composer, send them an email if they're alive. And chances are we're going to get a response. Or, hey, I'm walking down Midwest and, oh my gosh, and they welcome the handshake. It's kind of unreal. Chris, you just talked about two critical points that led you to really want to make a career out of this. But we also find that in the field, those are spots where kids quit. So between elementary or middle school, or between middle school or high school. How can we get that right? How can we get more kids to make that transition to that next level and really get more kids to be devoted for a lifelong journey with music?
Yeah, I think it really just comes down to getting your current students to interact with the students in the place where they're going. So, get your high school band down to work with the middle schoolers. We at JMU, we bring in high school students all the time to interact with our college students. And the main goal of those things, it's never for us to be teaching the high schoolers. I mean, sure, we do. We help design these programs and we run rehearsals. But really, the main attraction for the high schoolers most of the time is meeting other people from, the high schoolers, for example. They meet students from other high schools. They meet other clarinet players. They meet other trombone players. And they meet the college students who play their same instrument. And, I think we all know in band world, there are some personalities that transcend state lines and town lines in sections.
Yep.
You go anywhere. It's always a fun game. When I go do like regional bands and honor bands and this, is I ask the students at the beginning of the weekend, I say, you have this entire weekend. And at the end of the weekend, you have to guess what instrument I play. They actually get it right a shocking number of the time.
Really?
Because they sense a personality that you just don't hide. It's impossible, and it's, we joke about it all the time, like the trombone section, like they're going to be as goofy as they can be all the time, no matter what high school they came from. They're always so goofy. And you see that it's really outstanding. Like somebody has to make like sociology project out of the psychology project, whatever it is. There's a study there somewhere about how those personalities attach themselves to instruments. But I think getting students to continue with music there is just showing them that there are more people just like them who are waiting to become your friends at the next place. Whether you're in middle school and there's another middle school across town and you're going to meet up at the high school and meet your new best friend because they're also in band and they have all the same personality traits you do and they enjoy all the same things. Or whether it's at a high school and you meet some students from another high school and you decide, hey, we're going to go to this college. You meet in college somewhere and suddenly your band friends are like your closest friends ever. But I think that's really one of the most powerful things we can do is just introduce students to each other, both across bands, and then introduce them to the people who are at that next place, to see they're just like you. There's no magic to it. They're really just still musicians.
Well, and even beyond the high school and the college world too, like introduce them to the alumni band, if there's an alumni band. Or my father-in-law and mother-in-law are fully retired and they're in a retirement band. Like they love it. And he's so funny. He's like, I know it's not the most polished thing. They do actually do a really good job. But I just sit in those rehearsals and I look at all of these older generations of just band kids. Like once a band kid, always a band kid. We just went on the Big Ten tournaments with the pep band. Another cool thing about the athletic band world is you get to typically see other bands a lot more than the concert band world. And my students, it was in Chicago, they were having section meetups at the Bean in Chicago. So you had all the clarinets one day and you had all the trumpets. And I could have called it like, those are clarinet kids and those are drum set players and those are sousaphone players. And there's a rule for our travel bus that if you are a marketing person or a basketball administration person and you ride our bus, regardless of whether or not you're a band person, we're going to name an instrument for you based on your personality.
Oh, I love that. That's a good one.
Chris, let's play a game. What instrument do Julia and I play?
Oh, gosh.
Oh, all right. Here we go. Julia, you are a clarinetist.
Oh, my gosh. Like,
No?
I introduced myself as a recovering clarinetist.
Wait, are you actually a clarinetist?
I'm actually a clarinetist.
Oh, nailed it. Look at that.
You're a magician. How about Scott?
This is a tough one.
I think Scott's could be misleading,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to go, oh boy.
if that was a hint.
It's saxophone or trumpet?
Oh, well, you got one of the two. I'm a trumpet player.
Trumpet. All right, there we go.
Yeah.
I got it narrowed down at least. Okay.
There you go. You're really good at this game. You should write that book.
Wait, yeah, that's right.
Chris, GIA. There you
Yeah,
go.
GIA.
Next book, Chris.
The next sociology project.
Right. How to guess what instrument I play.
Yeah. Chris, honestly, I was going to say trumpet for you, but then you told us that tenor sax story.
Oh, interesting.
But I also don't know why. I think you look like one of my former students, Anthony, who is one of our best trumpet players that came through our program.
So I actually did not continue with the saxophone.
Mm.
I moved
To
to the trumpet.
what?
And then I moved from the trumpet to the horn, and horn is where I eventually landed.
Mm.
Oh my gosh.
So I took a winding journey through my instrument choice. I started on clarinet in 4th grade,
Okay.
and I learned the saxophone because I really wanted to be in the jazz band in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
And I was devastated that I couldn't play clarinet there. In hindsight, that middle school director, he's still there. Tim Johnson, love you. He now has clarinets in his jazz band. It's awesome. But I thank him because he inspired me to learn saxophone, and that was awesome. And then one of my closest friends and also my middle school and high school band directors played the trumpet. And I thought, I want to do that. It looks kind of neat. So I started playing trumpet. And then our assistant director in high school sort of tricked me a little bit, honestly. I asked if I could switch to trumpet in the band. She's a horn player. And she said, why don't you try horn? It's like the same thing, which is not true.
Not even close.
I did not know that as a 13-year-old, but I said, sure, it's got 3 buttons. I'll try it. Turns out it doesn't have 3 buttons. It has 4. But that was it. So 9th grade, I switched to the French horn. And that was that. I continued playing trumpet in outside band, as I call it. The French horn doesn't work so well.
Yeah.
So I kind of doubled up mellophone and trumpet for outside groups. And when I was teaching, if you've ever played a French horn, it's not the most graceful instrument to model for your students on. So I used to keep a trumpet next to my conductor podium every day. And when I played for my students, it was always trumpet. So it was kind of funny. A lot of my students kind of thought of me as a trumpet player. But really, the one I took lessons on was the horn. And that's the one I kind of go back to the most is the horn.
Horn is my favorite instrument. I think it gets the coolest parts. I married a horn player, and he said I was a pretty good horn player for my methods classes.
I love the horn. It's beautiful. No offense to the trumpet. Sorry.
None taken. Chris, I think we have a new standing part of this podcast now, and that's guess the instrument.
I think we do.
I love that one. I think you'll get a lot of success with that, actually.
I think it's the start of our sociology book.
There we go.
It happened with you. You're a contributing author.
Coming to a high school near you, a sociology experiment.
Right. Well, we're coming to the end of our time together, but I wanted to offer time for you, Chris, if you have any questions or any guiding advice for our listeners. This has been incredibly helpful. Just everything you talked about, breaking down barriers and making music truly for all. I want my students to hear this episode and I want them to feel excited about going into any size of program and to not be afraid to write for whatever instrumentation they have. So thank you for sharing that.
Keep making music. Love it every minute. Like you said earlier, it's a privilege. You don't quite realize it until it's gone. I think we all found that out in 2020 when suddenly music was a lot harder to find than it is right now. And I think that's something, just keep playing and don't take it for granted. I tell myself, nowadays, I found very busy days that are full of rehearsal this and conducting class that and every which way, just being pulled for music somewhere. And I tell myself so often, 15-year-old Chris dreamed of this day because I get to make music all day. And me today is not allowed to complain about that. That's something, we have the instinct to complain sometimes or, say oh, I have so much to do today. But when it's all music, it's all great stuff, Even busy music majors, oh, I have so much homework. Our homework is to learn a song on the piano. That's pretty awesome. That's a pretty fantastic way to live.
Yeah.
And that's just it. Just keep loving it. Find joy in music.
There's somebody out there in the world that wants to do so much what we're doing. And like you said, the younger versions of us dreamed of this. So take a second and celebrate.
I love it. I love that we were able to share space with you, Chris. Such fantastic thinking. You have lucky students, and I can't wait to dig deeper into your small band book. And just so grateful for you sharing space with us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was great to chat with you and great to get to know you both more.
Yeah. And again, we'd love to thank our episode sponsor, GIA. Chris has a wonderful book there with GIA, Small Band, Big Sound, published with GIA, and we thank GIA for our episode sponsorship today. For Music for All, I'm Julia Baumanis.
And I'm Scott Edgar.
And this has been The Heart of Teaching Music.